The American civil rights movement occurred in the 1960s. It was a social movement in which protesters strived for the restoration of land grants, farm workers' rights, enhanced education, and voting and political rights. Jimmy Santiago Baca, a poet of Apache and Chicano descent, learned to write while he was in prison. His career eventually took off. Poetry essentially saved him from a life as a criminal. Baca once said, "I approach language as if it will contain who I am as a person." Not only did poetry give him an outlet to openly express his hardships, but it also allowed him to speak for the thousands of other Chicanos who suffered in similar situations. In one of his many poems, I Wish My Life, Baca discusses upper-class Americans' hypocrisy of religion and both current and past events that have led him to question God. His humble and unique origin makes his words even more powerful. He speaks from personal experience and as an eyewitness. He strongly expresses the emotionally and physically degrading experiences that Chicanos and natives endure in their lives. Adding to that struggle, he accuses the rich folks of acting with indifference, ignorance, and false assumptions towards the Chicanos and native situation of constant struggle and discrimination. In order to explain the disparity between rich white people and the Chicanos, Baca compares the average white American salary to that of the typical Chicano or native worker. He also mentions the absurdity of overpaid celebrities, referencing how easily Michael Jordan makes huge sums of money while thousands of immigrants struggle to survive. There were, and still are today, instances in which border crossings resulted in death. In the poem, he mourns those who locked the boxcar, suffocating those Mexicans locked inside like the human beings who rot in prison. One example occurred in 1987, at the time Baca was writing and publishing poetry, in which 18 suspected illegal immigrants were found dead, locked inside a boxcar. The scene that Border Patrol's officers stumbled upon was horrific. The suspected illegal immigrants died from dehydration, and some had undergone convulsions in a baking boxcar that reportedly exceeded 120 degrees. In addition to the horrific death, almost none of them could be identified because they carried no form of identification. Not only were the deceased not returned home, but their killers were never found. Border crossing from Mexico is extremely risky. In 2012, 477 immigrants lost their lives attempting to cross the U.S.-Mexico border. Another example Baca angrily discusses is the prejudice against the Chicano and Indian professors at American universities. Baca writes, "Instance, at universities where professors are more uppity than a stretch of snowy Kansas field, rarely do they trust Chicanos or Indios to teach, only those with rug-burned knees." In the fall of 2011, a poll showed that out of those full-time faculty in which their race or ethnicity was known, only 3% were Hispanic and 1% were American Indian or Alaska Native, while 79% were white. Even though researchers have found that Latino faculty members are beneficial to higher education by engaging students in the classroom, improving Latino students' completion rates, making the campus more diverse, and conducting research on racial or ethnic communities, the number of Latino faculty has seen no significant growth over the past few years. Baca employs both of these examples to shock his audience. His obvious frustration and accusatory attitude towards the rich white Americans is extremely provocative and enticing. It engages readers while inspiring them to make a stand against the injustice, racism, and hypocrisy.